Okay, welcome everybody to Adult Study by Christian Education. This is the second of the series of Science and Religion. The first event was done in October 29th by the Professor Paul Turner. He was a seminary professor in PTS. And he introduced us the transhumanism. Now that recording is now posted in the church website, and it's collected good interest from the congregation with over 50, to be exact, I think 57 reviews, which is a very high number. Now today, we will extend his transhumanism to the next level of questions. With our own congregational members. This First Presbyterian Church of Palo Alto is known for high intellectual level of the congregational members. So our panelists today are Vida Kenk, and then Melissa Curvin, and Evan Hughes, and I, Suki Choi, will be our moderator. Okay. The first step is first introduce ourselves, because although we've been congregational members for many, many years, so we may not know exactly the educational or professional background. So let me start first. I was born and raised in Korea, and into college in Seoul National University, and came to the States and got my PhD in electrical engineering from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. My specialty was semiconductor engineering. So after that, naturally, I came to California, Palo Alto area, exactly Hewlett-Packard, and started to work as an engineer. And my career has been the engineer and a researcher, and a corporate manager in semiconductor area. And I did my first retirement, sorry to say first, but the first retirement in 60, and then went to seminary, San Francisco, the theological seminary in San Antonio, and got the degree of a master in theology. And after that, and then I did the prison ministry for a couple of years, and then went to Chico to teach electrical engineering in California State University. And then I did my second retirement. I don't plan to do any third retirement at this moment. Okay, then who want to be the next? Evan, are you ready?
Yes, my PhD is in physics from Caltech. I was at Caltech as a freshman through PhD, and it took me 11 years, kind of a long path to the PhD part. Okay. And then I taught physics at the Pomona College. Then I got interested in environmental topics because I was trying to mix my science with politics because of the Vietnam War, and in environmental arena was a way to mix in some politics. And turned out my career then was in energy and environment at SRI, and then at the Electric Power Research Institute, and for 3 years at the California Energy Commission.
Melissa?
Hi, so I'm Melissa Curvin. I did my undergraduate work at Brown and my graduate work at MIT. And then I came out here to California to do a postdoc at Stanford. And all of these were in general, normal cell biology. So something, cell biology with a little bit of molecular biology, some microbiology. I did a second postdoc at for a variety of reasons. We moved back and forth coast to coast at the Tufts Med School. And then we came back here because my husband got a really good position. And I saw an ad for a molecular biologist, microbiologist, cell biologist at NASA Ames. And I thought, hey, that sounds interesting. And I sort of wanted to go in and look and see what what was behind the gates at NASA Ames. So I went to the interview and I got a job to develop hardware for the International Space Station. And over time, over many years, this is many, many years, I've been at First Pres for just about 25 years, and this is about 26 years ago that I started at Ames. I transitioned into the field of astrobiology, and I could explain that further because I think it works really well with some of the concepts that we'll be discussing. I'll turn it over to Vita.
Oh, hello, I'm Vita Carmen Kink. I'm the only child of two biologists born in Puerto Rico at the beginning of World War II. At the age, my age of 8 years old in 1948, we moved to the area of Washington, D.C., and then Alexandria, Virginia. And I was first educated in college as at the College of William and Mary. I thought I was probably going to major in one of the modern languages because I am bilingual in English and Spanish, and perhaps do something in diplomacy, etc., UN, etc. Apple didn't fall far from the tree, you know. So by my junior year, I decided to be a biologist because I needed the science background. You know, I could read, and for a lot of the other things. And then I went on for a PhD in evolutionary and ecological biology at the Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then I came to San Jose State in 1966. I met Bill Minkle and married him at First Presbyterian Church in 1974. So we're coming up on our 50th very soon. And I've been a member of the church probably since about, 1970, excuse me, we married in 1974. And so since about 1970. I taught biology for 44 years at San Jose State. I ended up with some administrative experience, including becoming the dean of the College of Science. And then we retired to the Central Sierra Nevada, which is why you keep seeing me on Zoom. And I just want to say how grateful I am for the hybrid nature of our services. I do not understand computers at all, other than pushing the button for Zoom, but I am grateful for that.
Okay, thank you very much. You guys are all amazing. Transhumanism, if I sum it up again, is an effort to enhance a human capability in terms of longevity, intelligence, even morality and spirituality, using our technology of science and medicine. And that activity actually is under progress right now, for example, and we replace human organs if necessary. We alter DNA, and as a result, we, all of us, we live longer and healthier, and that's the fact. How the future of the humanity will be was suggested by many people in the past, but they lately, I will mention two people. One is, he's actually the Catholic priest who turned to a biologist and got a Nobel Prize by discovering the Peking man, the skeleton of the early stage of the Homo sapiens. His name is Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Okay, he turned to he's a Catholic priest in the background, so he suggested the omega point, where the future of the humanity will develop and merge to a single point where the human can meet the God, and he called that point the omega point. It's the vision was rather, to my understanding, was rather optimistic, but anyway. So he suggests the very optimistic, the bright future for the mankind. On the other hand, what is it, the Friedrich Nietzsche, we all know, the German philosopher, he proposed what we call Uberman, which is now related to Superman in the United States. But Uberman is not necessarily a nice guy. He's a very capable guy, strong and intelligent, but he doesn't exercise what we call the Christian the moral or ethics. So we can see in very different direction, how the humanity will develop in the modern age. Now, because all of us, all of the panelists are in science and technology area, so my first question to the panelist is, will this modern technology will enhance human goodness of the humanity? What I mean by goodness is the goodness against the evil, so are we becoming a better person as time goes by? So sure, we live longer, but doesn't mean that we are getting better person as technology develops. How about Vida? Would you start first?
Oh dear. Well, first of all, I want to say that I kind of feel like we live in a bubble in the Silicon Valley. There are over 8 billion people on the earth right now. And to consider, we're a very small, isolated community and take for granted a lot of things that the rest of the world is just trying to eat and have shelter and that sort of thing. However, in evolutionary biology, basically change often starts with a small isolated population. So, that might not be a great barrier. And another way that often change starts is not so much a small isolated population. Think about an island. Everybody's heard about the Galapagos Islands and the evolution there, but also after a major disaster. And you can think about, the dinosaurs at the end of the Cretaceous, and then more about the rise of mammals thereafter. And after a major disaster, which affects a large population that used to be very well adapted. Hey, the dinosaurs did fine for 160 million years. We certainly can't talk about that yet. But conditions change drastically. And, we might be going right into that sort of thing with climate change. So what was previously well adapted and doing fine, new adaptations are needed for basic survival. So whatever happens, I think, with climate change and all the things that we're going to do, the archaea, which are formed sort of related to bacteria, the cockroaches, they're going to survive. So I don't know. I sometimes wonder, and I'm going to be interested in, Melissa, your comments on astrobiology there, whether high technical development at a planet might only happen for a limited period of time until things go really wrong and that population is wiped out and something else is better adapted and survives. So with that cheerful note, I want to pass it on to anybody else who wants to talk.
Well, if you don't mind, Evan, thank you for the good segue, Vida, because astrobiology, there are a ton of different definitions, but I go back to a very old one that's origins of life, that's plural, evolution of life, distribution of life, and future of life on the earth or elsewhere. So when I first joined the Astrobiology Institute at NASA Ames, I was fascinated by the thought of origins, plural, because I always thought there was a single origin of life on the earth. And from that's where everything developed, the archaea, the bacteria, but there is a well-developed concept that things could have started in multiple places, not worked out, died out. There, I mentioned to some folks that there are people who believe in a shadow biosphere, that there could be other origins of life that are at different stages of development. So I used to use this as an excuse for when my experiments didn't work, that, oh, that must be some input from the shadow biosphere. But you know, within astrobiology, there's this concept that the Earth or whatever planet and life are so integrated. So the Earth and our environment impacts us, and we definitely see our impact on the Earth. So as things have evolved and changed, we're both both groups are back and forth influencing each other. But then you have, the whole, in terms of morals, to get back to the question that Suki was asking, I thought that we were finally, I was relaxed like in the early 2000s and 2010s. Okay, well, actually, I guess we always, well, I'll say early 2000s. We always seem to be involved in some sort of huge conflict on the Earth. And I was thinking maybe we've finally gotten past the point where we're always fighting with each other. And so much of it is due to competition. And I was thinking, will we get to the point using technology, using all of these available resources where people aren't fighting with each other all the time and creating these wars? And I mean, I'm so disappointed in the last 2 years, we have 2 new wars. So I think we'd finally somewhat settle things in the Middle East. So I don't necessarily see that technology has brought us there yet, but I still have hopes that it will at some point. And then the last point that I wanted to make is that, in terms of one within astrobiology, there are a large number of people who are searching for life elsewhere. And what they often look for is a disequilibrium. Because life creates disequilibrium. And maybe that's just the nature of our life, that maybe I should not be hoping for stable, consistent, that maybe there always has to be some clash. Maybe that's just the reality of life. I'll turn it, that might be a good physics term to turn it over to Evan.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Melissa. Yeah, Evan.
Repeat the key word again that makes you think of physics.
Oh, well, actually, there were a few, but I was thinking of disequilibrium.
Oh, okay. What I thought of on transhumanism was that it's science and technology, and it's of interest in religion as another way to make people better. And my thought is that the need for faith and the role of faith and religion and Christianity in particular will still be there, and in more or less the same role. That even a technically better human will still need what spiritual considerations offer, and a way to be in community. And to me, the church community is important. In one reason it's important is because of what it represents in human history. In the case of Christianity, 2,000 years, and you add in Judaism, and you have 5,000 years, or well, at least another 1,000 years, let's say. Those are my thoughts on the term of transhumanism.
Okay, good. Any questions from the floor, like Jeff or Shirley? Do you have any question? Or how about Ellen?
Ellen, you're muted.
I was thinking about the science. There's the science part of it, and then there's the sponsor of the science that goes ignored, I think, in a lot of these considerations. Like, for example, Oppenheimer. I don't know how many people have seen that movie, but I would imagine somebody has. He was responsible for inventing the atomic bomb, and he did it during a war, and he felt that it was really necessary to use, but he also believed that once the war was over, he'd be able, I think, he'd be able to talk the government out of using it again or putting some kind of limitations on it. And there was this other guy, I forget what his name was.
Keller?
Keller, yeah, who was sort of standing there, waiting in the wings to develop the hydrogen bomb. And the thing was that, regardless of Oppenheimer's intentions, he didn't have control over what he invented. And to me, that's very troubling, because it's easy to, do something and think, well, I'm going to do this with it.
To keep the lid on.
Yeah. And then somebody comes along and says, well, but I don't want it to be used for anything, any more war or something like that. And then there's a next, like in 5 years or 10 years, there's another group of people who come along and say, well, we have this invented already, so we might as well use it in a war. It's like,
Here's a new application.
yeah. And that to me is a little troublesome.
I'd be curious to know what you scientists think about what kind of entity can keep some regulations or keep some limits on some of the inventions that might get out of control.
So
Yeah.
Vita was speaking about CRISPR earlier, and that was fascinating because using the techniques of gene editing to apply to human health, is fabulous. However, I don't know if you want to speak about the ethics involved in that, Vita.
Well, I did want to say that we are already seeing that happening. And in fact, in the past week, there has been discussion of, I believe, the FDA approving sickle cell. Now, sickle cell is a situation where the hemoglobin, one of the tiny nucleotides that gives a code, changes that code as to the amino acid in the protein. Okay, proteins are made of amino acids. And by just changing that one little typo effort, you can prevent sickle cell anemia and continue for, the person's whole lifetime and the children they have, etc. Otherwise, the hemoglobin in the red blood cell crystallizes under low oxygen conditions, causing tremendous pain and internal bleeding and repeated hospitalizations and a totally miserable life for the people. And interestingly enough, this is widespread in areas where malaria is present. And, this might be an adaptation to prevent malaria, because mosquitoes don't like that hemoglobin either. But, it's a fascinating balance. And those areas where malaria is present, they have a whole lot of brown and dark skinned people. How much of this is going to reach people like that? I can't help wondering. Yeah. And if I could pick up on just one little thing you mentioned, Melissa, competition. One of the things we're finding out about natural selection now is the obvious stuff is competition and predation and, kill and die and that sort of thing. We're finding out how important symbiosis and mutualism is, and that's hidden, that's quiet, that takes a long time. It's not as dramatic as a lion running after an antelope, So it's a fascinating aspect of it that, boy, do we see through a glass darkly.
Yes.
Great.
That didn't answer your question either, but
Okay, so great. Let's move on. Now let's move to the more general question, than transhumanism. Science in general is an effort to understand nature with our reason and knowledge. So we always argue about the truth and then natural laws, okay? While religion is about God. Okay, we start with God with faith, and we pray to God, and we say that this nature, this world is created by God. So in the church we pray, but we do not pray in the laboratories. Because all of us are in, what I mean by us is a panelist, in the science, the science region, science area arena by profession. My question is, what kind of conflict do you see between science and religion in your profession? Are they in harmony, or do you see certain conflict? Yeah, for example, the Bible says there was an Adam and Eve, but my understanding of the human development was not by the single person or that kind of thing. So yeah, that is my question. And again, let me rephrase. What kind of a conflict do you see between science and religion in your profession? Okay, who want to start first?
I'll give a try at that because I see science and religion in two different realms, and therefore I don't see conflict. I would see religion and Christianity working on something I call the soul or spirit, or something less tangible. It may turn out to be molecules moving around in certain ways, but that's not how we experience it. And and if science gets to the point of being able to do for people what for me Christianity does, be a surprise. I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime. So I see them as separate and not in conflict, therefore.
So I can follow up on that in a little. So, when Suki was saying we don't pray in the lab, I have sometimes, oh, please let this experiment work. But and I believe that there is some element of faith, because there are things that we can't see. Quite often, the work that I was doing was trying to understand a mechanism. We can see the impact, the output, but we don't understand exactly what's happening. So we have faith that if we alter this, that will likely happen, but we don't know exactly why, and we're trying to get at the basic tenets. When I was discussing this topic earlier, I was speaking about the people who believe that we have to clearly follow what's written in the Bible. The earth was created in 6 days. No, but I don't know people who believe that in this day and age. Think of how Galileo was persecuted because he described that the earth revolved around the sun, and that wasn't supposed to be happening because the earth was supposed to be the center of everything. And on a similar strain, the thought that there might be life in other life, perhaps in God's image elsewhere, not on the earth, can shake people's fundamental faith in what is. But if you think a little bit further, should it? Why should a divine God choose to only put life on one body when we have seen through new technology how many stars there are and how many planets there are around it, or how many galaxies there are? I don't find my lack of concern about our uniqueness to be in conflict with my faith, but perhaps many people do. I don't know. How do all of you feel about that?
Well, I don't find a conflict, but teaching students, I taught non-majors, majors, graduate level courses, you know, all that sort of thing. And I often would have students who were believed literally in the Bible and who felt, you know, a conflict inside themselves. And what they would often say to me, well, you know, you're teaching this stuff, but do you believe in evolution? And I said, I don't believe in evolution, but I am convinced by massive evidence from a diversity of sources. Looking at the data, this is the best explanation we currently have. And we may have far more refined and detailed or very different explanations in the future, but that's where we are now. And think of it in the terms of God meeting us wherever we are. I cannot imagine the oral tradition from which Genesis eventually, you know, got written down and all that, explaining DNA, RNA, genetics, all that kind of thing. However, pottery they knew about, you know, taking the earth and molding it into a specific individual object. That makes sense. So it seems to me almost limiting your view of how God can act and how, you know, so that's kind of where I look at things. I don't know whether that makes sense to anybody else. So, you know, don't limit God. And also, I think in terms of ongoing creation, and that we are co-creators, you know, the changes that we have are doing to the earth. I'm thinking of the Gaia hypothesis and all that too, and the fact that you can identify the possibility of life on other planets from spectroscopy of, you know, whether they have an atmosphere and what's in it, and whether those are the sorts of things that life would produce, is fascinating. And to me, it's not just, as you were saying, one origin, but this is something that's happening all the time. And Earth and its inhabitants are working together, the non-living and living portions, and of other planets too. So I don't know if that answered your question either, but where I see the conflict is for some of my students to whom it is, you know, a source of real pain.
I wondered, what do you think is behind the drive to take the Bible literally?
The desire for absolute truth, and science is not going to give you that.
Not only absolute truth, but you're right, wrong.
Hmm.
So I have a little green light around my square. I'm going to complement what Vida said with a simple religious truth from a passionate lover of God, and that is, how small do you think your God is?
Well, Vida, thank you. And actually, you already kind of answered part of my next question. But before we go to the next question, let me come back to Evan. Because you are a physicist, so the physicists to say that the nature, what I mean by nature is this world, world and the whole universe is governed by natural laws. And natural laws sometimes it's deterministic, or sometimes probabilistic, we know that, and sometimes relative. But those are, and we human may completely comprehend the entire of the natural law, but the firm belief is that the universe or nature is controlled by natural laws. And do you feel comfortable with that? And if that's the case, then where is God? What does God do? And what's the point of playing in the lab? Because it's a law that governs, not God's providence that controls the outcome of the laboratory.
I'm not sure this is quite an answer to that, but I wanted to mention that I was impressed by a sermon or homily by a woman named Dr. Lucy Jones, who is a member of the choir at my brother-in-law's church in South Pasadena. And she was their preacher one Sunday in August. And I've watched her sermon, having heard about her from my brother-in-law. She is a seismologist at Caltech who is now moving into climate science. And she says that she was glad when she became an Episcopalian because she could now believe in dinosaurs. She had been exposed to some fundamentalist religion, I think, in the past. Get me back on track.
I, by the way, listened to what you had said from the time that we talked in Zoom chat until now, because I found that very interesting, and I just want to strongly recommend that homily, and perhaps other people will be interested in getting that reference from you, Evan. So forgive me for interrupting there, but it's a praise.
Yeah, what relates to what Suki just asked me was that she believed that God created the world using evolution.
Okay.
That was
Yes, that's actually what I've done. Yeah,
since,
put them together.
Yes.
That's more biological. On the physical science side, instead of looking at the origin of life, we look at the origin of the universe. And maybe there's maybe the God becomes the Big Bang, or so what caused the Big Bang? We can trace all kinds of things, including the creation of the elements. In fact, I thought the greatest triumph of nuclear physics as it developed in the 20s and 30s was the ability to explain, come by the 50s, the abundances of elements as they're found by understanding nuclear reactions and the fact that elements formed under the conditions that exist in stars, that you can account for the abundance of the element. I thought that's probably the greatest triumph of nuclear physics. There was one other thing I thought of, but I'll pass it on to someone else to comment.
Okay, Melissa, you are an astrobiologist, okay, and I know that in the theologian community, they are talking about the beginning of life on Earth from outer space. It's still a hypothesis, but my understanding in 50s and 60s. The atmosphere in science was that the origin of life was on Earth, and in early the age where Earth was forming, then the atmosphere and some thunder, lightnings, and that kind of combined together might have created life. Unfortunately, the scientists cannot reproduce that result in the laboratory, and then now some people turn their eyes to the outer space. What do you think? What is your thought about that?
So, one of the reasons that there's so many rovers and orbiters on Mars is that early Mars was anticipated to have had very similar conditions to the early Earth. So if life could have started here on the Earth, it may not still be there might not be extant life on Mars, but there might be relics of some origin of life also on Mars. So there are a number of people actively involved in trying to get samples that can be brought back, or in trying to measure things in situ on Mars, which is a great, it's a great goal because they're fairly close. Last year, I guess maybe about a year and a half ago, there was great excitement because some folks who were looking at Venus found a compound called phosphine in the clouds above the planet, and they thought the current thought was that phosphine could only be produced by life. So there is immediately a bunch of people said, no, that couldn't be. There were people who redid the studies, and they did find something that could have been phosphine on his, on a spectrophotometer. But the thought was that there aren't any conditions in which life could have survived and phosphine could have been retained in the clouds above Venus. But there are so many planets with so many conditions, and with the new technology, with the new telescopes, they are actually getting some numbers. I don't know if you've heard about the Drake equation, but the Drake equation tries to give a measure for the likelihood of life being found elsewhere. And it's a considerable equation, including things like the time, because as we mentioned, life could have started and ended in millennia ago. Life could be just about to start someplace, and if we're measuring it at the wrong time, we wouldn't capture it. But some of the coefficients in that equation are being answered now with these new telescopes that we have that can provide, so technology can provide answers to perhaps how God did create all of these planets and did create our universe. So I can, just as Evan, I think Vita was saying, there's a way to mesh it all that you can follow, you don't have that conflict. You can say, yes, this is a way that it could have happened and can continue to happen. The quote that I found from this morning's confession that I mentioned to Jane, that I hope she didn't mind that I borrowed, was, we try harder to defend what we think we know than to reach for what is beyond our grasp. And a lot of people try to find reasons why something couldn't happen than to try to explain how it could happen. And the looking for life as we know it here on Earth might be a really faulty way to do things, because we only have the conditions on Earth. So things might have been developed very differently on Mars or one of these extrasolar planets. And if we use the same techniques, that might be a really inaccurate way to look for things. So there's this whole group that are looking, it's called agnostic biosignatures, where they are just, their goal is to just look to see what they can find rather than to have these preconceived notion. If I find oxygen, that means life, or if I find, sugars, that means, or if I find DNA, that means that there must be living organisms, because other organisms might not use DNA.
That reminds me of a title of a book. I knew of the book. I don't remember that I ever read it. The title was Planets Habitable for Man, and it was on the subject of what you mentioned in the Drake equation, of how probable is it that there are other planets in a position for life, conditions of life similar to the Earth.
I was just thinking, this is obvious, I think, but this approach that you're talking about gives us a much more expansive concept of God, doesn't it? Much more than just the God that's in the Bible, has done these certain things in history, and is really confined.
Also, the guy who's a white man sitting on a throne.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question to Vida.
Oops.
The science of biology, is it true that I can say that the science of biology is based upon evolution?
Well, let's say that it's a concept without which you don't understand modern biology at all. And I think Dostoevsky essentially said that. Not Dostoevsky. Yeah. Anyhow, the genetics guy. But,
Mendel?
huh?
Mendel?
No, it starts with
Rick and Watson.
goes on and on. Dobzhansky, that's what I'm trying to say. Dobzhansky, and so did Ernst Mayr, by the way. But it's so central to modern biology.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when ever since the Darwin introduced the natural selection. And then the evolution has been a debate amongst the theologians, and now I think that war is conquered. However, even recently, I don't know, that was 10 years ago, you know about intelligent design.
Yes. Mhm.
Intelligent design, and the Supreme Court of the United States, they denied that. Do you think that evolution is by nature, natural selection only without purpose, or the evolution is driven by certain direction with a certain goal or purpose?
Oh dear. Let's say that first of all, I don't know. Secondly, I tend to think that things happen because it's not just evolution happening. It's evolution in a particular environment and with a particular set of environmental conditions, and those conditions are always changing and have changed and will continue to change. So you know, it's an interesting question. I think that basically natural selection happens depending on what can survive and whatever the conditions are at the moment. And I must admit that I do not see that as necessarily headed for a goal. But again, that's you know, just my opinion. I know that there are other people feel somewhat differently about it.
Well, Vita, can I ask a question? So what do you think? So as you know, do you believe that evolution is still happening?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
And do you think that as our environment changes, that we may not know how? And I mean, multiple generations. I'm not saying that in our lifetime, but that humans will adapt to what the earth will become.
I think we will make as good an attempt as we can to do so. But I am frankly concerned that the changes that are occurring now are driving so many social issues and so many wars and so many other things that I think we may manage to destroy ourselves that way. Before we have a chance to really, you know, you've heard the phrase adapt, migrate, or die. Those are the things you can do when conditions are changing. And it's a rather grim story, isn't it? Presenting. But yeah, I just so that was a real hot potato you handed me, Suki. Anybody else would is
Okay, good. Any other questions before I move to the next question? Okay, next question is I think.
Oh, Stuckey, what was your reference to the Supreme Court? I didn't follow that.
The Supreme Court, that
you talk about evolution and natural selection.
Yeah, intelligent design and evolution. Yeah, please, yeah, Google that. I'm sure that you'll find that.
What did it
I
have?
think it had to do with various attempts to place intelligent design into textbooks and into school curricula as an alternative to evolution. Yeah, that's what I recall, but maybe I'm, you know, on some other.
Yeah, you are right. You are right. Yes.
Yeah.
Suki, can I come in? You asked for questions, but I didn't formulate my question fast enough. Can I come back to Vita? And Vita, take a pass if I'm the only one involved here who doesn't know what you just said about that person that starts with the D and seems to have 4 or 5 syllables in it. You started a thought, and I'd actually like to hear the completion of that thought. Or
basically, he was responsible for a lot of the genetics in the first half of the 20th century, and a lot of work with fruit flies, along with T.H. Morgan and other people like that. And so he basically said that biology doesn't make sense without evolution. That evolution, you know, to try to teach biology and omitting evolution completely, you just can't do it.
Thank you. I heard that part. I missed the connection. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just wondering how the rest of you feel about the prospect of humans adapting enough to survive, given how the world is changing.
How about if Leif Erikson's prayer works? May peace be ordinary.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Love it. I just don't know that that would happen.
I know, me too. It was so so elated, and then it's, oh shoot, I don't think we can pull that off because there's economics, and that just seems to really mess up everything. So back to Shirley, I'm sorry.
I just,
Yeah, would anyone comment to Shirley's question? Would human being would adapt fast enough to the changing environment, or we will die out by failing adaptation?
I sort of think this is where technology may have to come in and give us a hand so that we can survive, you know, with, you know, higher temperatures, higher and colder temperatures, more UV light, less water, less food, you know, different quality of air. There's so much.
I do think, though, that there's a lot of things that can happen that we just can't foresee, you know, and there are so many people living in the world right now that there may be people who already have the genes to adapt to this. We just don't know who they are. Not that there's going to be a lot of them.
That might be part of the answer.
My inclination is to say that the technology and science will be able to solve all kinds of problems if they're that would. I'm confident that barring turning nuclear war on the planet, humans will survive. We want humans to survive in a thriving condition, and that's harder to guarantee. And it's a goal for us. It involves limiting population. It involves better science and technology and better economics to distribute goods.
well, Melissa, I was wondering what your work in the futures area, you know, so much of what you're looking at is it's very theoretical science. Are people thinking about what these how the technology they're working on can help with adaptation?
So there are many people. So, you know, one of the, as I was mentioning, origin, evolution, distribution, and future, in terms of distribution, there are many people who are trying to identify, you know, what allows this bacteria to survive at, you know, at minus 50 degrees, or allows this archaea to survive at, you know, in the, you know, in a hot lake, hot salty lake, with the thought that if these compounds can be isolated, perhaps they can be used in a way to help people. And then there are all the synthetic biologists, and that's not my area at all, who are trying to find ways to make more robust organisms. These are, again, in the, you know, these are not multicellular, these are unicellular organisms in general, but the goal is to, you know, to understand, using these techniques to understand, you know, the translation from, you know, unicellular to multicellular organisms, and what makes things tick and what makes things work together. So there are people who are, you know, futuristic, who are looking, you know, every few years there's a conference on that's looking forward to 100 years. What do we need to know to adapt to life in 100 years? It's a big concept. That's one of the things that I've always admired astronomers for. They're not working on something that they will live to reap the rewards from. They're looking to develop something that will improve knowledge 2 or 3 generations from now, which is very altruistic. So I don't know. Anyway, I have no answers.
No, but I like the way you phrased it. What do we need to know, you know, in order to?
Okay, let's move on to the last question, and we already covered quite a good portion of that. After all, the fact is we are all churchgoers, So we have faith in God and we practice our faith. Now the but we, for example, we each of us kind of confess with that we do not go, we are not the strict what we call the fundamentalist. We do not go outside of the Bible as a written. There's a certain the how can I say interpretation. Right. So question is how do you resolve that conflict? Or you said that it goes without any conflict, in harmony. But the reason that it goes harmony is because you adjusted your faith to your science. And can you kind of mention briefly? We went over it's almost 60 minutes, so I wanna close this meeting in 15 minutes. Would you kind of sum up your faith? I have a faith because the way that I see is, for example, beginning of life is such and such, and or the divine the power is running in such a way. Can you make your own statement for that?
My quick answer years ago was I have faith in Christian civilization. And I was immediately challenged by someone that, what do you mean? Is it as if Christian civilization was a oxymoron, that the Christians had not shown that they've civilized the earth? I think that was what the challenge was about. But some form of Christian civilization would be my answer to survival and adaptation and creating a better life.
So when you say Christian civilization, do you think that the Christianity will help civilizing humankind?
I find it yes. The track record is far from perfect, but I think we are better off from what Christians have done.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Melissa, how about you?
Well, I'm gonna upset Vita, but hear me out, Vita. So when I was in well, I didn't go to middle. When I was in probably 7th or 8th grade, I had the first opportunity I'd had to look through a microscope at a cell, and I think it was one of those cheek cell experiments. And I just marveled about the beauty and the intricacy inside of a cell. And I thought, okay, this has to be divinely designed because it's just too fabulous. And given any opportunity to look inside a cell, I will take it. And I know I have a lot of friends who felt the same way the first time they looked through a telescope. They were just fascinated and thought there has to be some divine hand in all of this. And but a lot of it can be explained by physics and order. There's each portion is designed for a specific purpose and works with something else and has to be coordinated with this and that. But it is fabulous, and it actually inspired a lot of my faith just by looking inside of a cell.
Interesting.
Oh, well, I'm very happy to hear about that wonderful experience and, how it has inspired your faith and continues to do so. And yes, there are many people, who feel that way. I just feel that we don't know enough in science to discard any possibilities. The other thing that this may sound funny because I thought one of the questions we were going to have was, why do you go to church? No, and basically so that I become improved. If I'm just stewing in my own juices, I can just. I need to hear from other people. I need to hear other ideas. I need to be part of a community. I need, particularly, so to be brought to my attention various social justice issues. And when we raised our family, we wanted our children to be raised in that kind of an atmosphere and that sort of a community. And then another thing, this may sound funny, but I feel a great deal of gratitude in my life, and I need to express it. And so in many ways, that's how I find I reach out in prayer. I don't know if prayer really affects God, but I know it affects me, and so whether or not God is responding to those prayers, I've had, experiences that one might, consider spiritual in my life, and so-called coincidences and things like that. And so there's a lot more, in heaven and earth than is dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. Yeah. So I don't know. That's not an answer to the question that you had, but it's an answer to a question that I was hoping we would be asked.
Vida, yeah, that's an excellent question, and yeah, thanks for that. Well, we all struggle to find the answer to justify our faith. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it seems almost impossible, but it seems like we fundamental of the faith, our Christianity is our firm faith in God, for His grace and mercy. Now, Jane, do you have any comment or any opinion to what?
I don't have any opinions whatsoever, but I do have a comment, and that is the larger scale conversation. I happen to know who is preaching on Sunday, and she, being I, can step aside. Any chance you three want to bring this to Sunday morning preaching this Sunday? Shirley, don't, Ellen and Jeff, don't you think this would be fabulous to hear, not a repeat, but this conversation, these questions, faith and science, progress, not progress, can we find that it becomes so open and accepting that it's ordinary? Do you think this would make a good Sunday, or do you want to hear about Vashti? Your choice.
Whether or not
I will not be available this Sunday. So
there it is.
We need to have a continuing conversation on the subject and continuing discussions, just in what format and all that. I want to toss that to Suki, who I think has some ideas to express on that he had shared with us. But yeah, just I don't know.
Well, Jane, this is an experimental the attempt on this topic, and if we feel that so far the outcome is successful, then we can continue this series, probably sometime in January, February next year. And one thought that I had in mind is now today the panelists have all the science background. Now. Our congregation has also reached number of the members in clergy, and so
leave us out of it.
We can have a similar format with the clergy people and theological people, and how they approach this the science and religion issue. Okay, all right, good. Well, if there's no other questions or comments, okay.
Can I just add one thing, Suki? Thanks so much. I've so enjoyed this conversation because I love hearing other people's viewpoints and other people's experiences, because what's that saying? We're greater than the sum of our parts. And I learned so much from all of you. And I appreciate the questions, Jeff and Shirley. They were great. So thank you for coordinating this, Suki. Very much appreciated.
Great, yeah, thank you, and then we can do it again. Okay, no problem.
I'm going to jump in with one comment, one additional comment. Suki, you and I, they're in Psalms study, talk theology. I do not, but you do, and praise God. Hearing these three scientists with their expertise, where I am constantly looking up the blooming words you're using, talk about praying, talk about God, talking about wonder. That's what I think people need to hear. So I would say we clergy, we're a dime a dozen, but you scientists who attend church, who pray, please talk to us.
That's a good perspective.
Yeah,
Jane, what?
I just want to echo what Melissa said. For those of us who are non-scientists, you blew my mind.
Yes, thank you for all of this.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Ellen. Okay, now, so let's close today's adult study. The presentation is recorded and will be posted in a church website. And I hope that you get a lot of attention and reviews from the congregation.
Amen.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think it might be interesting to see how many people will tune into the recording, just as you told us how many people tuned into the hearing the theologian two weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because I think we might get some reading on the degree of interest in our congregation to continue this kind of discussion. And I want to say how much I appreciated the questions, Jeff and Shirley, and because I would really enjoy back and forth interacting discussion, not just us so-called panelists and experts and etc. That to me was at the core of what we were doing this evening, and I really enjoyed it.
Okay,
We
thank you.
do that
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.